bless the years as they roll on by, and the days are a sign of what you're thinking. We want eternity, and you give us time, and our own lives seem to pass while we're blinking. Oh God of mysteries beyond our thinking, oh God of mysteries gone far beyond our thinking. We ask for light, you give us night and day to help us truly find our own way. We want you only, yet you keep us apart, so that we may mend our own broken hearts. Oh God of mystery beyond our thinking, oh God of mysteries far, far beyond our thinking. We live through life and we wonder if you'll be there when it's all ended. You keep your silence, but you give us a sign to let us know we are always befriended. Oh God of mysteries beyond our thinking, oh God of mysteries gone, gone beyond our thinking. Happy is the one who comes to you. Happy is the one, happy are the two. And we dwell in your house, and we eat at your table, and we say the prayers as our hearts are able. Oh God of mystery beyond our thinking, oh God of mystery gone, gone, gone beyond our thinking.
That was the world premiere of Jason's new song, Bless the Years. It's out next week on all streaming platforms. So, hello everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful start to the summer season. On behalf of the Foundation for Non-Duality, we welcome you to our sixth Non-Dual Roundtable discussion, where we, a panel of Jason Schulman's senior students and teachers, discuss the interface between ideas about non-duality and our daily lives. We're excited to be here with you today. And as you may or may not know, the Foundation for Non-Duality is dedicated to making the principles of non-dual thinking and practice as articulated by Jason Schulman available to the greater public for the purpose of transforming the consciousness of individuals in order to help alleviate suffering in the world. These principles and their practical application focus on the unitive connection between personal and transcendent consciousness as the foundational basis for change and for healing. Jason Schulman sees the study of non-duality, especially in its practical applications in everyday living, as part of the healing of the human soul. The aim here is to live our lives as both healing and healthy individuals who are aware of and connected to the entire web of being, including the totality of who we are. Living the totality of our being means including all of our human parts in our awareness, from our great courage and longing to connect to our many imperfections that work against these aims. So Jason Schulman's teachings are based on kindness towards the self and others. And the work of the foundation is to actualize this kindness in everyday life. So if you don't know Jason Schulman, over the past 40 years of teaching, he's worked to reconcile the deistic of relative paths of liberation with the consciousness of Buddhism and other non-theistic paths to create a truly non-dual path of healing, one that does not exclude any aspect of reality. His work emphasizes the healing of the personal ego and its rightful place in any path that seeks liberation from ignorance and the awakening of compassion. It also seeks to bring the human world, with its imperfections, into alignment with the realization of transcendent awareness. In this way, we develop a conscious awakening to the sacredness of every sentient being and every time-bound moment. Okay, and now, as we've been doing the last few roundtables, why don't we, before we dive into the conversation, we'll do a little meditation, okay? So I'm going to lead you through a short meditation, and you can relax, not too slouched, not too stiff. Just get comfortable and start to pay attention to your breathing. And just close your eyes for a moment while I take you through this meditation. It's called Inviting Everything In. Again, just be with your breath as it is. Don't get caught up in thinking your breath should be deeper or more regular or better in some way. Your breathing, just as it is what's keeping you alive. And that's sufficient. So just be with your breathing for a moment. So your intention in this meditation is to invite everything in. Begin with the sounds that are around you right now. Maybe you hear the sounds of other people talking in the background. Maybe a car horn or a siren. Maybe the wind or a bird. Invite all of those sounds in. We want them to be with you. We want them to be here. Now, invite all of the parts of yourself to be with you right now. The small, frightened parts, the courageous parts, the lazy parts, the devoted parts. Actually say to yourself in your mind, you, the one who forgets to be kind to yourself, be here with me. Come in. You, the selfish one, be here. You, the one who is argumentative, be here. You, the one who remembers God from time to time, be here too. You, the one who forgets God from time to time, be here as well. Invite all of the parts of yourself and all the parts of your environment to be present right now in this moment. Whatever comes into your heart or mind, whether it's a difficulty or a great insight, it doesn't matter. They are all treated equally. Invite them in, and let's be with all of this for a few moments. And gently bring yourself back to the space, back to normal consciousness. Okay, and we're back. So, today, it's an opportunity to have a conversation about our spiritual lives. And what we want to do here today is invite conversation. So, there will be time for audience interaction, and we would love for you to participate with questions and comments. And this conversation today, it's about a non-dual look at desire. I'm joined by Andrew Resnick, Damon Farnham, and a new guest and friend of the Roundtable, Henrik Nordmark. My name is Tim Rothschild, and I will be moderating today's conversation. So let me open this up to the group first with a question. Um, Desire is an interesting part of the spiritual path. Is it an enemy on a spiritual path? What do you think?
Um, I think it is interesting because when we're in the beginning of the spiritual path, um, I think a lot of us have this misconception that, oh, well, we need to like transcend the ego and just kind of become this enlightened being who all of a sudden doesn't have desires or is free of desires somehow. Um, I think in popular parlance, there's this notion of like, oh, the Buddha has said, get rid of all your desires because then that will eliminate all suffering, right? The desire is at the root of suffering. But I think that's a little bit oversimplistic understanding um, of the role of desire on the spiritual path.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, really, to kind of go with that, I think desire itself was actually my on-ramp to the spiritual path. I mean, I remember back when I was pretty young, like in my teens, and I don't even know if I would have identified it as desire, but it was like this longing to be more connected to something, to know something. And I don't even know if I knew what it was that I was longing for at that point, but it was certainly, something pulling me towards something that, and I would call that desire. And, and then on the more personal level, kind of the part of the spiritual path that is this kind of transformation of the self, knowing of the self. For me, it was also desire for things like intimacy, to be in a relationship, to be able to be known, and deeply connected with another human being, to be able to do it. So all of these are desires, but they were pulling me, what I would say is deeper into my life. So I don't see them as, the enemy at all. I see them as kind of, impetus to get more deeply into the spiritual path for me.
Yeah, even that idea of, well, I need to get rid of my desires, that is a desire. That's there's no out. That's always going to exist. There's no magical state where you just don't want anything. As I don't even think that would be good. We think that there would be no suffering in that case, but how boring. And I mean, that's aside from the spiritual pathness of it all, but just even recognizing that, like, oh, my desire to not suffer anymore, that's desire. To get rid of my desires, that's desire. This thing seems pretty omnipresent everywhere, pretty hard to stamp out. Maybe we should try to make friends with it, and at least kind of get to know it in a way. And I can easily imagine that one kind of entering the spiritual path, they could easily see desire as a bad thing, even before reading anything that the Buddha says, or or various misinterpretations across different paths. But even just saying, like, well, my desire is getting me into so much trouble in my life. How do I get rid of it? How do I do that? And it can be a very easy way to kind of turn against oneself, and make these parts of oneself into these enemies, as you mentioned, Tim. And I actually think that's in many ways a very natural beginning to the spiritual path for many people. And that's fine. And then at some point, you start to realize that, oh, maybe this isn't the most whole way forward, and that there has to be a different way of relating, that might create more ease, and also just might be more natural to being a human.
So desire definitely has a place on the spiritual path, huh? How about desirelessness? It seems to be like the end goal, right, of a lot of spiritual paths. How do you hold that?
As another desire.
Right.
Yeah, so we can't escape it, huh?
I mean, what is desire?
I mean, look, if you can come up with a way, let me know. But, like, I don't think anyone has really necessarily figured that one out. you can sit with the desires you have and not be beholden to them and recognize them more for what they are. But in general, this idea of extinguishing really anything, um, you kind of have to ask who is trying to extinguish this right now.
I'd like to bring up a related topic, which is, I know on some spiritual paths they don't talk necessarily about extinguishing a desire or all desires, but maybe transmuting them. So it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to just be this selfish human being who just cares about my own well-being, but if I put this in a grander context, it's like if I want the liberation of all beings, then that is totally fine. Or I know, pleasures of the flesh. That's I know a big no-no. But if we're talking about like devotion to God, then maybe that is perfectly okay. And so then we're really thinking about first some kind of discernment of classifying things into good and bad desires, and then maybe trying to either extinguish the bad desires or transmuting the bad desires into good desires.
So there's like a maturation, right? I'm thinking about a baby. I have a 7-month-old at home right now, and I'm watching her crawl around the house and put every single thing in her mouth that she possibly can. And we're thinking about desire, right? And in some ways, I have to act as the role for her of somebody that knows better, that is able to use that discernment, right? Because they don't have it yet. So I'm also thinking about my own development. When I was younger, my desires for something, if I didn't get it, I felt like I was going to die, right? So it speaks to sort of the who is, as you were saying earlier, right? There's like the sense of self changes, which changes the way we relate to desire. And if desire always has a place in our life, then it really comes down to how mature our relationship is to it, right? Because we're not trying to eliminate these desires. We're trying to include them and have a different relationship to them that honors the fact that desire is everywhere. Every sentient being has this desire to move forward, to connect. It's the foundation of our lives. So anyway, I'm thinking about that, right? We all have like this wise sage in us. And my thought is the immature aspect of our desire needs to have a connection to that wise sage. And maybe it's falling down and getting back up again that does that.
I like that. And I like the idea that like even our desires from our less mature places shouldn't necessarily be like thrown out, like, but maybe they can be held in a different way, with kind of like that bigger context, like the desire impulse itself. And Jason talks a lot about this. Desire itself kind of stays the same, but it seems like the part of us that is expressing that desire is what evolves and changes and matures. And to me, I think about it in these less mature places in me, these smaller places, these more defended places. They have very strong desires, but at their core, they're pulling me towards, health, being okay, being more connected to the world. So even the desires from the small places seem to be pulling me towards this, deeper relationship with life. The quality of it's different though. And it can be a sense of like, sometimes depending on where it's coming from, even desperation. Like if I don't meet this desire, I may die, or I may not be able to, go on. But at its core, it is trying to pull me into that same place, is what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I want to go back to something Henrik said, which was really interesting about this idea of, some paths will say you have to transmute certain desires, and it brings up the question, how does one discern Yeah, if you were going along that idea, how does one discern between, oh, this is a good desire, this is one that should be transmuted, or seen as bad, in a certain type of way? And first off, I would never tell anybody this is a good one. This is one that needs to be transmuted, whatever that kind of semi esoteric word means, and can mean a lot of things in different contexts. Um, but I go back to Damon, what you're saying about holding desire and actually allowing yourself to feel it in your body container, and that's a big part of developing the relationship with it, of what does this feel like. It, how do I stay with this burning, or this whatever, and from that place I feel like then a kind of wiser discernment can occur, so that you're less reactive to it, and there can be more of a choice as in terms of how to move forward or not move forward with it, in terms of acting it out.
So how do you guys deal with this in your personal lives? We all have these desires. How do you guys work with it?
Oh, I screw up all the time.
Yeah.
Ungracefully, right? Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's really hard. Really, sometimes, I mean, I've been doing this in my own personal work for a long time, but I still can have, desires that come from really difficult places. I think now I've gotten to the point where I do have enough of me that's kind of like a bigger self, that, when the smaller, kind of more, kind of urgent desires come up, I have a little bit of a bigger context to be able to work with it, but I still need to work with it. Like, I still need to kind of like, well, and this is me personally, but I do kind of like what I've been saying, is I let it be almost like a gateway to, that it's pulling me towards something. And that something might be that, quite honestly, there's something inside of me that needs to be addressed. There's something inside of me that may be small and broken, and is trying to get some kind of need met, and thinks that having it met in a very specific way is what it needs. But this part of me needs to be attended to. Like, it needs to be paid attention to, understood, embraced, and in some way, I need to kind of help it find its place in the larger part of me. But I mean, and that's what the desire is kind of leading me towards. So that's a little bit of the process, I guess, for me.
That's really great, Damon. And that brings. I'll share a very specific example, but I think that idea of desire as kind of often, not always, but as a kind of beacon towards a part of you that might need a deeper, closer look at, is it's really helpful. And I'll share a personal example that actually I think illustrates that. So I work as a conductor and pianist for shows, and oftentimes, if I'm, let's say, conducting something, I'll be in the music, I'll be doing what I'm supposed to, and then I'll kind of have a thought of, you should do a more florid movement so that people think you're a better conductor. um, or if I'm playing piano, a similar thing will happen of like, or like I'll be playing and they'll be like, are they looking? Are they looking? Here's a really hard thing coming up, and I'll, to try to show off. And for, I would say, the first few decades of my life, I wasn't even aware that that was happening. I would just I would do the thing, and then I would kind of go back and forth between being in the music and being in these other parts of me that wanted to use it as some sort of way to gain attention and really love. And that's still there. I mean, that's not something that's been excised in any way, and nor do I think that's going to happen. But now there's much more of an awareness of when I get hooked into that mind place, and then I can just let it go more quickly and return back to the thing that needs to happen in that moment, which is serving the music or serving the show, and not about, okay, am I looking cool right now? And but to what Damon was saying, that points to something in me that needs, more attention, and needs, this probably very young part of me that wants love and adoration in a certain type of way. That's a really clear indicator that, like, oh, there's really something there, and it's using this opportunity to it's trying to, like, co-opt this opportunity. And again, it's not bad. And I think it's not about getting rid of that, because now I can maybe even get to know that part of me a little more. So, yeah.
I think too. Go ahead, Henrik.
Well, I guess answer your question, Tim, and I don't do this perfectly by any means, but it something that I strive or aim to do is to try to include as many of my desires as possible. A bit in the spirit of the meditation we did at the very beginning of inviting everything in. I was like, okay, can I be and tolerate being my, desire for a new car, and for enlightenment, and for even things that we might consider negative, like my desire to punch that guy in the face because he pissed me off. And can I have that all within me, and not transmute these things or extinguish them? Just really give space for all of them to just be. And I know some in this community have perhaps know of this meditation called returning the clipo to the original form. I think it's very much kind of in that spirit as well, where we just allow these things to exist vividly within our own desire body. And I think that actually allows us to be much more whole as a person.
It sounds like, first, like you're saying, well, what Andrew was mentioning, we have to wake up to it first, right? We have to be awake to the desire. Then you have to tolerate the desires. And it's my understanding that then you have to listen. You really need to listen to that part of yourself that has the discernment, that's screwed up 1,000 times before. You got to listen to all the voices. And somewhere from that place, then you can take sort of the right action. And the desire can sort of find its right timing in the world, right? Because sorry, Andrew, go on. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, maybe not so much right action, but righter action.
Yeah.
Like
right,
1% more, 1% more correct action. Not even correct, but you get what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, totally. For me, when I am awake to my desires, I really have to listen to the who is, right? Jason sort of speaks about the who is as, that sense of self that changes over time. And like Henrik said, we have to give space for these desires. So that sense of self has to mature enough to be able to give space. Otherwise, we're helpless against it. We need to go get support somewhere along the way, right? So for me, it's like I need to be awake that majority of the time. I've got this suffering, and I want to eat something right before bed, and I go, I need to be awake to that. What is this form of suffering, and am I going to give into it today, or not? And that's sort of my choice in that moment. But really comes down to the who is, I think.
I think it's good, and I think like part of what's kind of going off in me as you guys are talking is that desire itself is actually part of being human and part of being alive, and there really is an aliveness to it that myself, the way that I experience my life and being human and growing spiritually, is that I don't want to dampen my aliveness. I just want to be able to be essentially able to have it all inside of me, and then know how it's right to express and share and these kinds of things. But I don't want to make it smaller. I just want to have kind of more capacity to experience it inside of me without necessarily getting taken over by it or hijacked by it, so that, I'm completely identified with it and I think I have to satisfy it, or I think it's just the answer. And that I think takes time, that kind of starting to be a little bit of a bigger context yourself, so that you can have it inside of you without having to make it smaller to be okay.
Yeah. Even just saying that sentence, Damon, to be identified with it, what does that actually mean? It speaks to, what you were saying earlier, Tim, about that feeling where if I don't get this, I'm going to die, right? When you're identified entirely with desire, that's the feeling, because that's what if you are that desire and it doesn't complete itself, you're going to die.
You are
like
dying.
like that. Exactly. Like that's what it feels like, because you're in the thing. And sometimes even waking up to it is just being like, whoa, I'm in the thing. I'm still in it. I can't get out of it, but I'm in it. I think there might be a wish, or I'll speak like, I think I thought for a long time that, like, oh, if I'm aware of it, then that'll just automatically mean that I'll get out of it, and then I can relate with it wisely. Nope. But it can definitely, you can just be awake to, like, I'm really in this thing right now. I'll probably, and at some point I'll probably not be in it quite as much. And that might be the best that you can do in that moment.
So we have a question from a listener. Jeanette asks, what do we think precipitates desire?
I suspect that desire is in the very nature of all of reality. Like even, plants desire to grow, and birds desire to fly and do their thing. And you could take that even to, rocks and minerals. I mean, they want to continue being rocks and minerals. And without anthropomorphizing too much here, but but I think it's inherent in all of us to want to unfold our true nature, whatever that happens to be for us.
There's a just a little quote here in the book. There's a chapter on desire that we kind of referenced in this, and Jason says we might say that we're made of desire, and we'll always be made of desire. In fact, from my point of view, desire is an impulse. The impulse to move forward, to survive, to stay alive never changes. What changes is the who is that owns this desire. And I think that's, we've been saying that a lot, but I think that speaks to that question quite a bit.
And, to that question, and, it's a really, I really love that question. Because I see it very much in myself. I don't know if this is where it's coming from in you, but I know when I ask myself that question, I'm often trying to, there's this idea of like, if I can get to the bottom of it, maybe I can understand it better, or like where is this coming from? And I think one of the assumptions I take for granted there is that there's this thing, and then at some point it desires something. Right? That, like, the desire kind of happens after this thing exists. And I think what this is all pointing to is that it's actually, they happen at the same time. This thing couldn't exist without the desire, which couldn't exist without the thing. I don't know if that makes any sense, or if it's too out there, but they are one and the same. They happen at the same time. That thing only exists because desire is there.
So codependent origination, that sort of thing.
Great.
Yeah, well,
no, totally.
Right?
I mean, yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's so. I mean, I agree. I think it's totally built in, right? Everything in this universe, I believe, has desire within it. And when you can honor that, there's like an impersonal side that shows up, right? So everybody has these desires to be, say, liberated, to be free, right? That's why we're on a spiritual journey right now. And you hear, I'm just pulling this right out of Beyond the Now, the chapter on desire. Jason writes about how Hasidic masters and in Buddhism, there's all these tales about people that have left behind their smaller desires and have opened to a larger desire, which is like the Bodhisattva vow, right? Not only do I want to be free, but now I've got this bigger desire where I want everybody to be free. I want everything to be free. And I think that's a wonderful thing when you look at the sort of the maturation of the self, of the who is in relationship to all of these things that we deal with.
Yeah, and I want to say two quick things to that. Or actually, one, which is I know that for me for a while there was this idea of like, well, that bodhisattva desire is the better one, and I want to get there and not have all the personal shit, because that's the stuff that screws everything up, and that is just better in so many ways. And I don't. That's not the way it works. It's the integration of the personal needs to happen, and that will very naturally give way to a bigger thing that isn't. That's what the world wants. It's not what you want. That's built into the world. It's in many ways it's an impersonal desire, even though you experience it personally, but it just comes through.
I'm curious if you guys have had this experience that I sometimes have of I have a desire to manipulate and control some of my other desires. I know, like in my 20s, I tried to force myself to like going to nightclubs many times. Because like all of my friends were really into going to nightclubs, and I just found it horrendous. Like it's like, you know, people are smoking and drinking and bumping into you, and it's loud, and it just was not my scene at all. And yet I sort of felt like, well, I should be hanging out with my peers and socialize with them. So year after year, I would like go to nightclub, find the experience horrible, vow to never go back again. And then a year later, I would say, like, oh, well, maybe this time, if I try really hard, I can really force myself to like this. You know, I just wasn't earnest enough in my attempt last time. But I think, you know, there are many subtle ways where we probably do this in our everyday lives as well.
I think absolutely. And part of the suffering that you willed yourself into, right? That's a part of the listening that we want to have, right? So even that the desire, I mean, it gets complicated, but let me say just like what a relief it is to be able to say we can have all these desires, first of all, like they have a place. And then it kind of comes down to like a resonance or a dissonance with reality, that relationship, right? So there was a dissonance for you, and eventually you listened to it. You know, that's what I think.
What it makes me think about too is even in that, you know, kind of whatever you want to call it, smaller desire to like go to the nightclub and do that, and it's like what I'm also hearing is that, you know, it's almost like the essence of that desire was you wanted to be connected to your friends, you wanted to be part of community, you wanted to, you know, have this connected experience. So, you know, the way that you were doing it might have been, you know, kind of you know, an idea that you needed to learn didn't actually fulfill the deeper desire that you had, but that was a learning process. But the essence of that desire was, I get it.
Still
it's
good,
like,
yes.
It's still good. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, as we're talking, I also, you asked kind of early in the conversation, Tim, and I was just curious to touch on this with you guys a little bit, but the idea of desirelessness. So we talk about desire, and even the fact that desire exists sort of implies that, you know, there's an opposite or something else. And I know spiritual paths talk about desirelessness a lot. And when I started thinking about, you know, this topic, at first I was like, desirelessness, like, I don't know that. Like, that's, you know, that's something that's idealized. And then I kind of started thinking about it a little bit more and what a version of that might be like for me. And I started to think about, you know, those moments that we have that are more like like in our language from the school, we might call it something like form preciousness, or you might call it like beingness, or where you have a moment where it's like everything has its place, and you're part of it. And those are lovely moments, right? We don't live in those moments. They don't last forever, but they're lovely moments. And to me, there's an essence of that I don't know, maybe that is a little bit of what desirelessness, might be. What do you guys think?
I like the way Jason describes it in that chapter, actually, how it kind of turns it all on its head, where desire and desirelessness are no longer in opposition, but instead, desirelessness is that state of consciousness that comes about when we allow all of our desires to have a place in our lives. And then we can choose, listening to that wise sage, we can choose with discernment, sort of what desire we want to spotlight in that moment or act on and connect to.
Yeah, I think he also talks about going eyes wide open into desire, which I find very evocative, right? It's not that we're running away from our desires, we're not entranced by them either, but with all of our being, we're very consciously choosing to step into including all of those desires.
Anything from you, Andrew?
No, I don't know. I don't know is my answer.
Cool.
I know I've had that experience of when everything can just be as it is, and the sense of okayness that comes in that place. And at that point, I don't know whether or not to label what's there as desirelessness or desire, or to me, it's kind of at those moments, I'm like, great, this is kind of nice, and it's just kind of that simple, yeah.
So,
Okay, I got one more question for you guys. Okay, so as I was thinking about this, I was also thinking about longing. And is it different, or is it the same? Is it just a different word that means the same thing that we're talking about? And I have sort of my ideas about this, but I'm just curious to kind of throw it into the mix and see what that might stir in you guys.
I had the same question, Damon, and I don't have an answer for you, but I have the same question. Because longing, when I feel longing, it's different than desire, but it's sort of, I don't know, it feels like a broader sort of thing. Desire feels more narrow than longing to me. And desire can have this particular kind of intensity to it, especially if you want to take it all the way to addiction, right? But let's just talk about desire as it is. One of the things that if our who isn't big enough to give space to all of this, then that desire can become really narrow and intense. And we can feel like, I have to get this thing right now or I'm going to die, right? We've all had this experience in different ways. And the longing, if we can include the longing in a certain way, it might, I guess the longing is more connected to the wise sage, So that's how I hold it.
I'm throwing this. I don't know, but it seems as if desire can be more object focused in a way. Like when I think of longing, I often feel, and maybe this goes into the broader context, I often don't know exactly what it is for. It feels more kind of open ended in a way, whereas desire feels there's more of a specificity to its aim.
I think that's similar for me, actually, where longing feels almost like this wistful, subtle desire to move in a certain direction, but I haven't yet fully identified exactly my object of desire. Yeah.
There's a part of me I'm feeling right now that so I can kind of float around in this kind of intellectual place of like, is longing different than desire? Like I can do that forever, and I love it, and that would bore everybody. But like, yes, let's do that. And there's a part of me that in this moment is aware of the where this question really feels important to day-to-day life, in just that sense of that really natural reaction to, all these things I want are causing me suffering because they often don't get fulfilled or fulfilled completely, um, or they lead me to do things that I shouldn't be doing. Um, and they seem really problematic in a way because they lead to they lead in so many different ways to suffering. What do we do about this? What can we do? And that's why, that I think, as we were saying at the beginning, like it's easy to turn to, like, I'm going to find the spiritual path where what the answer, just don't have them. Desire is the root of all suffering. We've all heard that in so many different guises, right? And then it seems like, and even in certain interpretations of the Four Noble Truths, desire is the problem. What do we do? Get rid of desire. And that, how human that is. But I think I guess I want to really ask the question around desire, like from that standpoint of what do we do about this thing that seems to be there no matter what, on a practical level. How do we deal with this? This is the situation we find ourselves in. There are these forces inside of us that want to do things.
Got to tolerate it.
Yeah,
Got to create
Make
space
room for it.
Yeah. Because otherwise, the dualistic thing is we end up chopping ourselves into pieces. This is good, this is bad, and it creates all this separation. But that non-dual approach to desire says it's all good. It all exists, right? Let it exist in light and relationship. And then, I'm feeling into that relationship between longing and desire. And to me, I guess where I'm going to land today after talking about it, I think desire is informed by the longing. And just like you said, Andrew, there's that specificity that desire brings about. It's like that now it's coming into the material world, whether it's inner or outer, that connection. The longing helps inform what we want to connect to.
Mm.
So it's not this wild thing. It's not my baby at 7 months old, right? Putting everything in its mouth.
Right.
At the risk of stirring up a tiny bit of controversy, how do you guys feel?
Please stir up controversy.
How do you guys feel this non-dual perspective on desire would fit in or not with some other spiritual paths like that talk about the law of attraction and all these ideas of like, okay, you can manifest anything you want, you just need to like visualize it and feel into its reality, and then poof, it magically comes into existence.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because one thing that perspective doesn't do is it doesn't ask, where's the desire coming from? So it basically is almost immediately validating the desire as like it should be fulfilled. And I think one of the things that we're saying is that, that may or may not be true, but like you have to by creating space for it, allowing it to exist, building a relationship for it, we can investigate it and learn about it and maybe help parts of us mature. So a path like that is basically saying like, you should be able to just put the thing in your mouth. Like, you should be able to have it, and we're going to try and help you get it. So I think there's a little bit of I know one of the things that Jason says a lot is some spiritual paths actually will help the self change. And so in some ways, what you're describing doesn't require the self to grow. It just says, we're going to try to give you spiritual tricks to get the thing. So if that's what, if basically, I think if you do that for so long, you realize that you actually don't feel any more fulfilled as a human being. Like, your human being hasn't matured. Anyway, just some thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, to that end, it's like, if that's what, like, great, do that, get all the things you think you want. And then, if that makes you happy, great, you win the game. But there'll be something won't be being fulfilled, and there's that cycle of endless wanting that will probably continue until something is looked at in a different way.
Yeah, it's
also
interesting.
It's just there's something about, I'm thinking about sort of the personal side of life and the impersonal side of life. And when you're doing that sort of spiritual technique, again, there's nothing wrong with it, but it kind of puts the ego back into the center of the universe. It doesn't particularly include all of reality at that point. It's doing something else. That's my take.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, because it becomes, this form of like spiritual materialism where, as you said, the ego is front and centered. It's not necessarily an integrated ego that's in relationship with the wholeness of all of life.
Right.
And I'm guessing that would lead to some kind of crisis at some point. Maybe not right away, but at some point you'll get into trouble.
I want to go to something you just said, Henrik, and what you just said, Tim, which is about that idea of, like, it's not including the whole of reality, or as much of it as we can include. And this might be a very elementary question, but like, I think we're making an assumption here, which is, why is it good to include all of reality? What, like I'm asking that from the perspective of someone who, like, hasn't been doing non-dual stuff for a while. Like, why would you want to do that? There are a lot of bad things in reality. Why would you want to include all of reality?
Well, I can tell you that from my experience in life, when I don't, I actually personally feel smaller. I feel more fragile emotionally and mentally. I suffer more. I feel tight. I feel like I'm making choices out of desperation or survival, if I were to really be honest with myself. And then when I am able, and this is the gift of what this path has given me, is that, the more of reality that I've been able to include, it's helped me feel bigger, more relaxed. I am able to choose to make decisions from a completely different place. I have much more intimacy and pleasure. And on and on and on. And it's like I have this resiliency where things that used to trigger the shit out of me, it's like they move through me very differently now. So that's my answer. Yeah.
It changes your consciousness, doesn't it? When you include everything as best we can, because then you're coming from a place of wholeness. So it changes us. And when we change, the world changes. So it's that whole thing of inclusivity lets us, like you said, Damon, it lets us come from a different place. And I think that's important.
Yeah,
You first, Henrik, and then we got a little comment.
Sure. I really like that question. Like, well, why would we want to include, like, disease and social strife and all these things. Like, surely these are bad things that we should all be fighting against. But again, we're not excluding anything at all. So even though we're including more of reality, we're not saying it's like, okay, now disconnect from your desire to create change in the world. That's also included. Even though change means that you're kind of quote unquote fighting against a certain aspect of reality, but only from at a certain level.
That's a great point. So we have an offering from Samantha, who's listening right now, and she says, I think we're also told by our culture that we should desire certain things versus what we actually desire.
Absolutely. Marketing and all of these other things are very powerful engines. Right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. All I can say to that comment is, yep.
Yeah, I mean, it turns they help us fall asleep to a certain extent, right? It does something. Marketing does not all marketing, right? But some marketing and even sales, there's different tricks and things that get you to forget the wholeness and go to the narrow. And it sort of highlights a desire or an insecurity or something, right? And then we forget, we get impulsive.
Right. Even politics right now. This is really interesting that somebody was talking about how, issues are showing up in politics that basically, they're telling us we should care about. And then all of a sudden, they become these huge issues that everybody has opinions about and everybody's fighting about. And, and it's like, and if you, backed up like 2 years, you'd realize that some people had feelings about them, but they were much smaller. So it's almost like, there are these engines that are telling us, you should care about this, you should desire this, you should, and we're getting hijacked by it, and we're letting ourselves. So I really think this is exactly what you said, Tim, is like, it's lulling us asleep and keeping us asleep. And so we have to fight against it and find our own voice, our own real desires. Like what is it in me what do I value? So I really think we have to kind of keep coming back to that and kind of shake off, some of these things in society.
All right, so we got sorry, go on. I was just gonna say we have a minute and a half left and there's one question. Do you think we should do all right? So Michael says, maybe this is more of a theoretical question, but I'm interested to hear about the relationship between desire and resistance or aversion. They feel to have a relationship, and I'm wondering your thoughts.
I think resistance is a desire. Like if I need to do a piece of work and I have resistance, I'm desiring something else. I mean, yes, there may be things in the resistance, but like it is a desire itself also in some ways.
I think you nailed it.
Short answer.
Yeah, good. So anything final thoughts?
Yeah, just quickly to the earlier point about sort of societal influences, whether it comes from marketing or politics or parental influences or whatever. I would say it's like, well, even that needs to be included in our experience. I mean, we can choose to act upon it or not, but the fact that perhaps at some level I desire to please my mom or dad, that too is a desire, and I mean, we should be awake to this, and from that place make a choice as to whether we still think it's a good idea. But again, no point in trying to exclude it.
Good. I think that's a great place to end today, if you guys are all okay with that. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. You guys were great today. And we're going to meet on the second Friday. Moving forward, we're going to meet on the second Friday of every month. So that's when we're going to be doing the Non-Dual Roundtable. We're going to stick to it as best we can. And just a reminder, the Foundation for Non-Duality lives and dies by your donations. So if you feel compelled to offer anything at all, we would greatly appreciate it. And that's it. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You bless the years as they roll on by, and the days are a sign of what you're thinking. We want eternity, and you give us time, and our own lives seem to pass while we're blinking. Oh God of mysteries beyond our thinking, oh God of mysteries gone far beyond our thinking. We ask for light, you give us night and day to help us truly find our own way. We want you only, yet you keep us apart, so that we may mend our own broken hearts. Oh God of mystery beyond our thinking, oh God of mysteries far, far beyond our thinking. We live through life and we wonder if you'll be there when it's all ended. You keep your silence, but you give us a sign to let us know we are always befriended. Oh God of mysteries beyond our thinking, oh God of mysteries gone, gone beyond our thinking. Happy is the one who comes to you. Happy is the one, happy are the two. And we dwell in your house, and we eat at your table, and we say the prayers as our hearts are able. Oh God of mystery beyond our thinking,